Welcome to Insights in Sound, where we talk to the people behind the scenes, behind the technology, and behind the music. People you may not know, but you should. And please check out getitinwriting.net/shows for a full list of our podcast YouTube series.
Good morning from NAMM. This is Insights in Sound, direct from the NAMM show floor. My guest this morning is renowned composer and synth geek, Amin Bhatia. Synth geek meant as the highest form of compliment, of course.
Thank you. Yes, I take it as that.
Yes,
Absolutely.
yes, indeed. How you doing?
I'm doing all right.
Having a good show?
I am having a great show. It has been years since I've been at NAMM for all of the worldly reasons, and it is so great to be back.
It really feels good, doesn't it?
I mean, it's ramping up, right? Not everybody was able to make it here this first time. Everybody's ramping up, so it's kind of like we're in low power mode on the iPhone. We're just slowly
But
getting there.
as
But
you
it's
mentioned,
nice to
the
see.
Tech Awards last night,
Tech Awards
lots
was
of
great.
fun.
Yeah,
Just wonderful.
Fred
yeah.
Armisen was hilarious.
It's just great to be back.
Yeah.
So let's talk about some of the stuff you've done. But before we talk about where you are now, let's talk about how you got there. So I know you were born the poor child of sharecroppers, and
Actually, it is a weird kind of youth thing. I was born in London, England, because my parents were studying there. My grandfather's from India. Then my parents were born in Africa, so I spent a few years in Africa in my childhood. And then thank you, Idi Amin, who came along and made the whole country a mess. We got out of there,
Alright.
and then I went from Kampala, Uganda, to Calgary, Alberta, Canada. I was 10 years old. That was
And you
very
remember it like it
strange.
was yesterday.
Oh yes, yeah, that was
Mhm.
very strange. All these bizarre customs, and Africa was very strange as well. Sorry, tacky joke. So lots of, I guess the plus of it was just I had a lot of different cultures. I had English roots, and I had Canadian roots, and I had African roots, and I had Indian roots.
And it shows in your music.
Pardon? Well, you're very
Yeah,
kind.
It shows
Thank
in your
you.
music. You have a
There's
you have a
multiple
different
influences.
approach to music than someone who is trained specifically in let's say Western music.
Thank you.
And that's
Yeah,
a different
some of that comes
sensibility
through.
because it's a different scale. Not only a
Yeah.
different scale, but there are different harmonic
Yeah,
relationships and all that comes into
Yeah.
it. So
And
let's
like
talk
so
a
many
li-
people in childhood, I pushed that stuff away. I
Well-
wanted to be American. I wanted to be modern.
Of course.
And then realized as the years went by, there's all those things that I learned from those Indian modal scales that work really, really well in a number of ways. So
and you ended up being cool anyway, despite all that.
You're so sweet. Clearly, you got the money. Thank you.
Oh yeah, absolutely. We got the check. It's cashed already. So musically,
Yep.
I know you have again a bit of a diverse background. I know you do have classical training, but not in the typical
No,
traditional
yeah,
sense.
it's a weird thing. Many other musicians will know that I was blessed and cursed with perfect pitch, and
so
many of
sorry.
your artists that you've talked about,
That's got to
it's
be
a very
painful
cool
in a show
thing.
like this.
It's like a pitch memory. You actually remember pitches of things, which is great when trying to learn things and transcribe things. It does get in the way though, because playing a transposed instrument is impossible.
Well, and let's just really quickly differentiate between perfect pitch and relative perfect pitch.
Perfect pitch is being able to hear a tone or a note and know what it is. It's basically pitch memory, or being able to sing a tone in your head and know what it is,
Right. Whereas relative pitch is just to hear one tone and know what it
and
is
then
in
know how to
relation
move and
another.
transpose from that, which
Yes,
is
exactly.
frankly much more practical for an
You
arranger.
know, that's
to be
what
able to do that.
I have, and I'm
Yes.
happy about it.
Yes.
It's a little bit annoying once in a while when I realize that my bass is just a microtone out or
Oh,
something
yes.
like that.
Yeah.
But that's why we have tuners.
Yes.
Mhm.
Yeah, I'm not to a microtonal level for sure. I mean, Jacob Collier, I think, is the only person I know that can do that. But very weird, and you should check with all of your other guests and stuff whether you've talked about synesthesia. Has that come up yet?
It has not.
Oh.
That's good. That's good. Thank you for bringing
I guess
that up.
I'm
Go
the
for
first. This is
Yes.
some new discovery. It's the new thing everybody's beginning to realize. I only discovered it a few years ago thanks to a producer that I was working with who has synesthesia. And it's basically a fusing of the senses. Usually it's color, and in youth, two senses are fused together. So that color right there, to me, that's E flat. Yeah.
I wonder how
Yeah,
the
we've
JBL
now
people
gone
feel
off the
about that.
rails. This is now bizarre Twilight Zone stuff. but I could hear that. That's a lovely E flat right there. You can check this out later, and I hope I'm not wrong. It's a bizarre thing.
I'm going to check that.
Yeah, of
You
course,
know I
as
am.
you should.
You
Otherwise,
know
I'm
I am. Oh,
talking
yeah.
out of my arse.
Uh-huh.
Um,
And you would never do that.
I worked with Stephanie Morganson, the producer of a show called X Company, and we were writing this one story about this, World War II vet who has this ability to fuse senses together, and she wanted this particular melody to be an E flat because that's the color blue for me, so I want that to be a nice E flat thing. And I went, no, E flat's orange.
Oh, so
And
is this different for different people
so
then?
each person, you're basically fusing childhood memories and colors. Some people have been able to
Interesting.
trace it back to those letters on the magnetic letters on the fridge.
Uh-huh.
Parents trying to teach their kids,
Okay.
the letters of the alphabet, and those things came out where the letters were different colors, and kids actually remember the colors as well as the letters. So to some kids, the letter G is green. It can't be anything else.
What's frightening to me is that now I'm just realizing that I have probably walked out of the house dressed completely out of tune.
This is a problem. I'm
You
so
know,
glad I was able to help
I mean,
you today.
here, I thought I was walking out as a perfect fifth, and instead I'm like, microtones out somewhere. Oh, it's awful. Oh my
That's
God,
what-
I'm gonna have to redo my whole wardrobe now.
We've been doing this, 7-8 minutes now? We're off the
We're
rails.
way off the
Everything
rails,
is
yeah.
just screwed
Anyway,
from
so
now.
your
Anyway,
own training, he said,
So it's a
trying to
bizarre
corral
set
it
of
back
things,
here.
and taking piano lessons was tough. I mean, growing up in Africa, I had this small table thing called a harmonium, which is like a table
I remember
accordion,
harmonium.
and that's all I had. And in taking piano lessons, I had to go across town to play the only piano that we had access to. So I hated piano lessons as a kid, couldn't stand it. And my parents, bless their heart, they kind of, went for the middle ground of letting me get some theory done, but not, I didn't do the 12 years conservatory thing and stuff like that.
Uh-huh.
But that's what I loved about synthesizers. They could be my own orchestra. I didn't have to study and learn all the different clefs of a string section. I could just simulate every one of them, one note, one line at a time on my Mini Moog. And it was a fun hobby for many years. So one of those stories where I did not expect to get into music. This was just a fun thing on the side. I'd studied broadcasting as the day job, and the music stuff was just an
So you're
experiment
going
on
to be
the
a
side.
DJ?
Say again?
Were you going to be a DJ?
I was a DJ. It
Ooh.
was exciting for a very short time. I thought it would be so great. They put me on a night shift at the radio station, so the first
Oh
time I
yeah,
thought
with an
that
audience
was
of
great.
3, right?
That wore off very quickly. 3:00 in the morning.
And not just that, but you don't get that immediate
You
feedback
don't
from
get
your
that
audience.
immediate feedback. Plus, I
Yeah.
couldn't use my real name. I mean, this is the early '80s.
Uh-huh.
The idea of not having an anglicized name in North America was unheard of. So
Oh
couldn't
yeah.
use Amin Bhatia on the radio. This was a radio station in Calgary, so we had to go with a pseudonym. I was Alan Benson.
Alan Benson.
Alan Benson.
Ooh, how Anglo.
I'm Alan Benson, and here's Billy Joel for the 4th time at 3:00 in the morning. 3 in the morning.
Oh, my
and
God.
it lasts very,
Mm.
the charm of it wore out very quickly, but I loved production. And so fairly soon they moved me into the production department, produced a lot of radio commercials, radio plays, splicing together little sound design things. And that was kind of my first world of actually being able to make a living in anything related to media.
And that's an interesting segue too, because one of the things that you got into very early was synthesis.
Yeah.
And again, you didn't approach it in the same fashion that a lot of people did. Some people got into synthesis to replicate other instruments.
Right.
Some people got into synthesis as creating sounds in that sense. You did sort of a hybrid of that with a few other things tacked on, didn't you?
Well, it's an inspiration of two different things. First of all, it was an inspiration, of course, from the great Wendy Carlos, right? When I heard Switched on Bach, this
Of
idea
course.
of Bach being done in a whole new way.
Yeah.
Loved that idea. For me, I'm a lover of 19th century, 20th century classical music. So when Tomita came on the scene, with things done by Debussy and Mussorgsky and Stravinsky
Oh, yeah.
on synthesizer.
Sure.
And Tomita experimented more with tonal colors. That blew me away. That really spoke to me. Other people, get going about Jimi Hendrix or Billy Joel or Elton John. For me, Tomita was it.
Uh-huh.
And so my dad, bless his heart, seeing my love for that sort of thing, he offered to get me a synthesizer, a Mini Moog synthesizer. Poor guy had no idea how much it
Wow.
cost. we went to the music store, and I said, "Look, that's and he saw the price tag. It was like, oh. So my parents,
let's go have lunch and talk
bless
about
their
it, right?
heart. My parents, thank you. They went into their credit card and helped me get a mini Moog.
That's pretty supportive right there.
And at
Amazing,
first, I
yeah.
mean, the sounds I was making out of the basement, I mean, I thought I was going to be Tomita overnight, right? But it's like, learning oscillators and filters and noise generators and all this squealing coming out of the basement. My parents were just like, oh my God, what have we done?
We just spent our life savings on,
Mm-hmm. And then as the weeks went by and things started to get crafted, my parents began to realize, oh, look, that sounds like actual music. So I think they were very relieved that this was actually evolving into something that was musical.
Now, as you say, you were already classically trained. Here you are then confronting an instrument that A, has tonal possibilities that are unlimited,
Right.
almost. B, has a user interface that is daunting to say the least. And then on top of that is monophonic.
Right.
So,
Right.
Yeah, it must have taken a while to get
Now, this
your
is
head around
interesting.
all
All
that.
those three things you talked about, they were all some sort of paradoxes because classically trained, I have perfect pitch. I didn't have a lot of classical training at that time. I caught up on all my theory later. What was the second thing you talked about? Daunting interface.
Yeah, the interface.
I submit to you, everything is daunting until you get to know it, right? And that's one of the
Well,
things I
yes,
loved about the
yes.
Mini Moog is it was one section at a time. I was kind of learning.
It's very
one
left
thing
brain.
at a- And it's very left
It's
right.
very-
The,
there's
the,
a
the
flow,
signal flow
everything-
is
yeah,
beautiful.
yeah,
There's so
absolutely.
many, as you know, as we've seen, there's so many synthesizers that copy that basic idea that Bob Moog
Absolutely.
first started.
And to his credit, Bob Moog basically copied the idea of a mixing console.
Yes.
Same kind of concept. It's just, start here, go here, go here,
Yep.
It makes sense. But at the same time, it's using controls that we really didn't have before.
No, not back then.
ADSR,
that's
what
right.
the hell's that?
That's right. That's right. But you learn what that is, and then you understand the basic building blocks of sound.
Yeah.
And then monophonic, to me, I was actually grateful that it was monophonic. It
Why
took it took a lot of time, obviously, but because I love instruments of the orchestra, so many instruments of the orchestra are monophonic, right? The woodwind section, the brass section, pretty much monophonic. Strings, well, technically they're monophonics. Of course, you can do all kinds of double stop stuff.
Yeah.
But it's technically monophonic. And even the way Tomita was doing his stuff was mostly monophonic synths. And so for me, learning and also catching up on my harmony, that was the beauty of it. Because for me to create a whole bunch of harmonic lines, I had to overdub them one at a time onto a 4-track tape recorder.
Now, that was going to be my next question is,
Right.
Did you have a means of actually creating those harmonic relationships?
The tape
Okay.
recorder, actually, we had that in the house before the synthesizer came
You had a
along.
4-track?
We had a 4-track.
Yeah, no wonder
had
your
a
dad was so supportive. He was
God
he was a
bless
geek already.
My dad was an electrical engineer at one point in his life, so he was always very supportive of electronics and that sort of thing.
So what kind of 4-track was it?
You really want to get into all of this? The
Well,
first
I just
one,
want to know because my first 4-track was a TIAC 3340
you
SX.
got the 3340. Good for you. See, I couldn't afford the 3340, so I got the Akai 630 DSS, which
Oh.
could do everything that the TIAC could do. Unfortunately, though, it could only do 3 3/4 and 7.5. You could do 7.5 and 15.
I guess I was just cooler.
This is
At
a
least
geek
for a
fest.
minute
There
or
are,
two.
There are 4 people that know what we're talking about. At
I know,
this
right?
Particular point.
But no,
Um,
it's interesting to me. Seriously, I don't want to get too far down that rabbit hole. But the idea of having this monophonic instrument is completely changed when you say that you have the opportunity to create those harmonies. I mean, one of the things that my first synth was also monophonic. It was a
Right.
Pro One sequential
Right.
circuits.
Yeah.
And I used to do things like detune the 2 oscillators.
Yes.
So that I could do a string patch.
Oh, sure. Okay. Yep. Yeah, that's exactly it.
And so I think, learning how to use those tools,
That's exactly
and really, that's another thing that has always fascinated me is the fact that we had these tools that even though at the time we were overwhelmed with how much we could do with them, compared to what we have now, the limitations were so great, and that forced us to work harder.
Yes, it is. It forced us to work harder. It taught us voice leading. You had to think in advance of what kind of stuff you were going to do.
Yeah, you
because
had to
you were
commit.
executing a 1 track at
You
a
had to
time.
make a commitment to the track.
got it.
I'm going to record this.
You got it.
Because then you're going to overdub
That's exactly it.
and bounce.
Yep.
And
Yep.
yeah, that's it.
So the Mini Moog taught me orchestration, the 4-track taught me harmony,
Uh-huh.
and the sequencer taught me form. And I was very grateful, even with those limited things, and back then my limited, formal knowledge. I was, looking back, I'm actually very grateful of that particular path that I took. And as you alluded to, the problem we have now which is a very different problem, but an equally important problem is there's too many options.
There are
It's
too many
too
options.
easy to go into a studio now without any idea of what it is you want to do and just play around. Now, sometimes, playing with sound and stuff is wonderful. You just want to sit there and kind of geek out on things. I totally get that. But on real deadline oriented stuff, or when I really have a goal of wanting to create a piece of music, I'll actually sit in the kitchen and just, flesh things out of what it is I want to do. And it'll either be score paper, it could even just be a piece of paper with little modules, just little connections, little ideas, bubbled ideas of where I want things to go, a flow chart. Got to see Wendy Carlos's flow chart for time steps.
Wow.
Mike Oldfield did that for Tubular Bells as well. And that completely spoke to me because that was the blueprint. We have all this non-linear stuff. We listen linearly. It's still about taking a listener through a journey, giving him or her surprises along the way, having important things to say, and then all that, what do they talk? Tension and release.
Yeah.
All those clever little surprises. And I find you usually have to plan that out in advance. You can be open to happy accidents, of course.
Well, happy accidents are always great.
Oh, they're wonderful.
You alluded to something that I think is really important, which is the power of limits.
Oh, huge.
If you have so many options that you have what they call the paralysis of analysis,
Yeah.
you end up.
I've heard that. That's good.
Yeah, you end up trying all these different things. You got 200 tracks, you fill them all, and then you never really get anything realized in terms of an idea. And I love the idea of, once in a while I'll limit myself to I'm only going to use this one instrument.
Yes. Yeah, that's what I do a lot.
Which, of course, even these days, that's
Yeah.
sometimes not enough.
Yeah, I'm going to limit myself to Omnisphere. Well, actually,
Exactly.
there's a lot there.
Or, I've got this new one from Cherry Audio, Dream Synth.
Dream Synth is beautiful, isn't it?
It is, but again, there's just so damn many options, I could just sit there with the presets for 3 hours.
No, there's some beautiful stuff in there.
But again, I think there's a real power to not having too many choices because it forces you to channel those energies to something else.
Exactly.
And I mean, on a related note, we were talking the other day in a panel about mixing, and somebody complained that everybody's always looking at the meters and always looking at the display and everything, And I said, I turn off the display. I close my eyes because if I can cut off the other stimulus, I'm going to focus more on this one thing.
Yep, absolutely.
Limitation, because we've got so much coming at us. I mean, here we are sitting in this trade show, even on the last day on a Sunday morning, there's so much sensory stuff coming at you.
Yeah.
How does your brain sort through that to be creative, right?
Agreed.
Yeah.
There's new studies that ADHD is becoming more of a problem now than it ever
Squirrel.
was before.
What?
And I'm like, are you kidding? Of course it is. Between the
Yeah.
things that our phones do and billboards all over town do, of course we have to concentrate. I think we're going to see now a much more concentrated effort in blocking things out. I mean, it's a very different problem from what we had decades ago.
Yeah, I could see that.
Yeah.
So let's swing the conversation back to you here and rope it on in again. How did you get into... Well, first of all, the brunt of your work at this point is basically scoring for TV, for film, right?
Yeah, that started slowly when I got my Mini Moog synthesizer and started adding things. I was scoring documentaries. I worked at a radio station. The television wing was down the hall, and I started doing documentaries for them. Started doing commercials, that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
But thank you, Bob Moog, for the Mini Moog, and then thank you, Ikutaro Kakahashi, for the Roland synthesizer competition.
Uh-huh.
And
This is
Roland,
what started to shape your...
That's what.
musical...
Well, that changed things for me overnight. I mean, first of all, Roland with their great synthesizers and everything that they had,
Uh-huh.
they had decided to create, in stimulating the industry, just a worldwide synthesizer competition. They had done several of them in Japan, and they were now expanding into the world. So the 5th annual synthesizer competition was now open to everybody around the world. And a friend of mine, Dave Kletke, he saw the back of a Keyboard Magazine ad, and it was this ad that, said, send us your best stuff. So I put this 5-minute thing together. I'd been helping a friend with a radio play, a big science fiction radio play thing. And I, coming up with some John Williams ideas for that sort of thing. So I finished it all off, sent it off.
Did you send it off as Amin or as Alan?
Thank you. Yes, no, I was very proud to start using my real name. Bless your heart. Yeah, the Alan Benson days were
Good.
behind me. Thank you. Sent that off, and and a thing came back, and I'd initially, submitted in the amateur category, and then it came back. They moved me to the professional category, and I got grand prize, which, that changed everything overnight.
Yeah,
I
that
can
kinda
still see
doesn't
when I
suck,
read
yeah.
that thing. Well, it was huge. I mean, first of all, thank you, Roland. I got, this kind of notoriety. The judges were people like Oscar Peterson, Ralph Dyke, who worked at Roland.
Oh my gosh.
Tomita was
Yeah.
one of the judges. Bob Moog was one of the judges. It was absolutely fantastic. But the doors that then opened, Ralph Dyke played my tapes for people in LA. He played it for David Foster, and he played it for Steve Porcaro. And the big thing that they were both surprised and supportive about is, how is a kid with a mini Moog creating all these deep, thick orchestral layers? And it goes back to what you were saying. It was just limitations. I just had this one thing, so I had to just make the most of it. So
Yeah.
it was like, it was like animation. It was like layers and layers and layers of animation. So instead of going out and shooting a beautiful scene outside, here's somebody that drew everything. I drew the trees, I drew the clouds, I drew the thing, and it was all. So
Another thing about it that I think is interesting is that because you were using all synthesis for the most part, you could get away with a lot more layering. Like, if you're using a lot of organic sounds, for example, on a 4-track,
Yep.
you're limited to like 2 or 3 bounces, and that's it.
Right.
But obviously you understood enough about working with a 4-track too,
Yes.
to understand how to
Yeah.
layer those sounds,
Yeah.
bounce those
Yeah.
sounds, because that's an art in itself too.
Well, the engineering thing, it's built in. You have to be an engineer
Yeah.
to get into
Well,
this
you
kind of
become
stuff.
one.
You become one.
Yeah.
And because I'd had some of that training already, in my broadcast world, and also as a kid, I was the one in charge of the family tape recorder. I was splicing tapes, and we were doing family music parties, and I was recording them and all that other kind of
All
stuff. So
right.
all that knowledge really came in handy when I had this beastie mini Moog.
Mhm.
And as you know, you learn which tracks to put in first.
Yes.
You don't
yes.
put the bass in at the beginning,
Right.
because that's the
It'll
one
be
that
gone.
degrades almost right away.
Yeah.
So it was an interesting way of building things. I would literally have ensembles and flesh things out. It then got to a point where I had 2 4-track machines, so that I could
Ooh.
preserve the amount of degradation in each of the bounces. And so what I started to do was I did a rough sketch. Either it was a piano or it was a synth solo line, a click track of sorts.
Right, and then you lay stuff
And
on
I
top
printed
of
that
it.
multiple times on one tape.
Uh-huh.
Then I did string overdubs with this section. Then I did brass overdubs here. Then I did percussion overdubs here. And then I would hand sync these different sessions to the other 4-track. So this group of 7 bounced strings would go to track 1 of the second 4-track. I don't think I've ever gotten into this with anybody else, dude. This is so great. My wife has already gone to sleep. She's rolling her eyes on this when I put her through.
But this
Then
is
the brass
important, yeah.
pass is on track 2. The
Yeah.
percussion pass is on 3,
You know-
leaving 4 for the bass.
Yeah.
And so able to preserve as much of the fidelity without degrading the tape.
Not just that, but the way you lay those things together really matters.
Yeah.
I was talking recently with producer Ed Stasium, and he was telling me that he had been watching the Bee Gees record,
Oh, yeah, right.
and he said the way they recorded vocal lines was fascinating because all 3 of them would get around the microphone and sing a unison part,
Yes.
then double that unison
Yes.
part, then triple it, then do the same thing with the 3rd harmony, and then the 5th harmony. And that's why
Wow.
it's so thick. Now, of course, you got the whole sibling thing as well, with
Right.
them locking in. But similar to what you're talking
Sure.
about, where you really are, you're layering things, but you're layering them in such a way
Yep.
that it creates
Yep.
different tonalities,
Yes.
and as the degradation,
Which you can
took
still
advantage
balance.
of the degradation.
Yeah, which you can still balance.
Yeah,
So just
yeah.
like they could balance the 3rd against the 5th, how much of the
Yeah.
thickness they wanted in the dominant before bringing that 3rd in.
Exactly.
Same thing with my string brass passes. I could still play with the
Awesome.
balances of all of that stuff.
Yeah. Okay. So we have now thrilled all the music geeks and bored everyone else to tears.
Pretty much.
So obviously, this Roland competition opened a hell of a lot of doors to you, not only in terms of your professional work, but also relationships. I mean, you're naming names here that I know you've had long-term relationships. I know Bob Moog,
That's Bob.
for
Yep.
you were close with a lot of these people. These relationships are, I tell people all the time how important relationships are. in
huge.
this industry, especially.
I don't know of any artist, I don't know of anybody creating something in the entertainment world. It's a combination of whoever the artist is, and then it is the wonderful champions behind that artist.
Yes.
It is the managers, it is the producers, it is other musicians that are supporting that person. So I've named a few people now. For me, Steve Porcaro. I'm sitting here because of Steve Porcaro. I'm sitting
And
here
Steve's
because of the
just a great
genius
guy,
of what
yeah.
that man
Mhm.
is, but also the humility and the understanding, which also comes from his family, the amazing Porcaro family, that combination of ambition and humility, which I recognize in my own family.
Thank you
And
for pointing that out.
it is.
I think that's so important, and
huge.
you know, we see that so many times, and you know, I know that we all have our own personal struggles, we all have our own personal directions,
Absolutely.
but to me, I think humility is one part of it, but I think there's a certain aspect of mutual respect.
Yeah.
You know, just as much respect for somebody who works their ass off and never gets a recording deal, their
Yeah.
music never sees the light of day. You know what? Doesn't matter. What
Right.
matters is this music moving somebody somewhere?
Yes. Yes.
You know, I mean, I have albums that I've worked on with artists who have come back to me years later and said, you know, this was one of the best things we ever recorded. And it never went anywhere. You know, maybe everyone and their mother heard it and that's
I know.
it. It doesn't matter.
I've given up predicting that.
Yeah, oh yeah.
You and I have
yeah.
a list of things where someone comes up to us and says, this is the project that's going to make your career.
Right.
And nothing happens.
Exactly.
And conversely, you help a friend with an overdub. The next thing you know, it's on some giant project.
Right, the stuff
So,
you
yeah.
throw away,
Yeah.
the stuff you don't think about, and,
Yeah.
and I don't know if there's really a connection there or if it's all just
Yeah.
with the way the universe works. But you know,
I've long given up trying to predict it. I now just try and enjoy myself on everything I'm doing, and eventually something sticks.
yeah, and you know, I just feel like if you can make, we got into music because it made an impression on
It has
us
to be fun.
because it was so important to us
Yeah.
on a personal level, and to me, man, that's why we're here. I don't care if 20 people watch this
I know.
or
Yeah,
if
yeah,
20,000 people watch this.
Yep.
What's important to me is the people that are watching it, they care the way we care.
Oh, yeah. And it's so nice when you make that connection. You know, it can be anybody.
It
can
is.
Be somebody you meet down the street. It can be, I mean, yesterday I got to know David Rosenthal, Billy Joel's keyboardist.
Yes, he was here yesterday.
Because
with us.
we were hanging out at the Old Men of MIDI group, which is this wonderful association of old MIDI people.
as
As they called it and stuff. And of course, we honored the great Dave Smith, whom we just lost.
Oh yeah.
As of this recording, it's less than a week ago now. We lost Dave. So, you know, Bob, Dave, Taro, all these amazing people who really, you know, this industry is their legacy. And so much
We owe
of
it
what
to
we
them.
have everywhere is because
Yeah.
of, and again, their humility, their ambition. You know, each one of them have said that, you know, their favorite, you know, they are musicians because of how they empower other musicians. I know Bob said this, I know Taro said this, where it's like, I don't think of myself as a musician, but when I can make other people create great music, that is what excites me.
Well,
And we're so grateful that they had that kind of, you know, that's the kind of thing they wanted to do.
yeah, and this whole industry is really, as you say, it's built on the shoulders of giants. We all stand on
Yep.
those shoulders.
Yep.
You know, Bob, people like Les Paul.
Yep.
You know, and again, these are people who, if you've been fortunate enough to meet them,
Yep.
it's a humility and it's also it's just a happiness. You know, it's not this is not a zero-sum game. It's not a competition. You
No.
know, we're all here to help each other.
And on that note, and I'm sure you've said this yourself too, I just want to reinforce it, you know, from all the marketing side of things, the big challenge I'm seeing now is we have this kind of illusion that is created from the marketing side that, you know, buy this piece of hardware, buy this software, you will be
Yeah.
a star overnight.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that is a lie. That is a marketing lie. This stuff is going to take time. I get that. I mean, you know, I'm fortunate enough to have lectures now, and and people come up to me and ask me what my process is. How did you do what you did? And inevitably, at one point, it's like, what piece of gear did you use? You know, what was the magic plugin that made you successful? I was like, all of them, and a lot of time. This takes
10,000
time.
hours.
Yeah.
That's what they say. You know, and
Oh, I never knew there was a number. Someone said
apparently there is.
approximately
Yes,
about
yes.
10.
So you
That
better go back
sounds
and
about
check.
Right.
Better go back and check your date book. Make
Oh, I'm
you
sure.
know, okay.
That's about right. That sounds about right.
No, but
You
it
gotta
really
make
is.
mistakes. You have to make mistakes. That's a big part of it. There's, I don't know about you. I have some really bad music tucked away.
Oh gosh, yeah.
Right?
Are you
That
kidding?
at the time I thought, this is so great. A week later, I hit play and I go, oh my God.
I have
Okay,
some of
am
it
I
that's
glad
out
nobody
there.
else heard that?
Oh no. I
You
have
know?
stuff that's out there, that I've heard on the radio and cringe
Oh, boy,
because
yeah,
like,
I'm with you there.
oh
Sure.
shit, and of course, part of that is the fact that hopefully we're always growing,
That's
and
that's
whatever,
exactly it.
and that's another thing too. When you talk about this humility factor, to me, the idea of thinking, oh well, so and so is so much better than me because he or she won a Grammy or he or she did this.
Oh, yeah, no.
We are. I said that the only person you're in competition with is yourself yesterday.
Oh, that's nice. Yeah.
And really,
exactly.
honestly, everything that we do, it's toward a common good, isn't it?
Yeah.
And that's what I love about this industry. That's what I love. And to your point about the tools, man, we've got some great tools. Absolutely.
Oh, there's no excuse.
But you know
now
what?
For great music. We have amazing tools.
Go back to your concept of the first mini Moog that you had. It's you take a rudimentary tool, even the lowest budget synth, guitar, whatever it is. You put it in the hands of somebody who's been working those 10,000 hours. It's going to sound great.
Yeah.
You take the greatest, multi-$1,000 synth in the world, and you put it in somebody's hands who has not done that work.
Oh, yeah.
They're going to play some good patches because there's presets in there
Yeah.
that someone else has done. But learning to use those tools, and in a sense, you're better off, once again, going back to the whole power of limits thing,
Oh,
you're
huge.
better off
Yep.
not getting all those great tools all at once,
Agreed.
because you're going to have to take some time and learn them,
Yep.
learn what you're doing with them, and learn how to use them to make your sound.
That's exactly it.
And you're going to use them differently than the next person.
Yeah.
So talk a little bit about what you've been working on lately.
Well, as the years went by, I guess the next big thing that put me on the map was this cop show that Ari Posner and I worked on called Flashpoint. And it was one of those
Flash in the
things
pan.
where, we at the time we thought we were flashing the pan. And again, it's what I talked about earlier. It was one of those throwaway things.
Uh-huh.
We've pitched on a lot of projects that didn't go anywhere. That one, we pitched on it. We didn't get it originally. They gave it to a marquee songwriter that had all sorts of great credits that they could use to kind of, buoy the project with. That person was not used to film deadlines. They were used to doing things, 9 months at a time. They weren't used to having 20 minutes of music done in a week.
Yeah.
So a few days into it, when it was realized that person couldn't make the deadline, we were called. They said, you're on. And we now had 4 days to do what normally takes about 10 days to do the pilot. And we just cranked that thing out. And that
There
was
again,
5
man.
years of a TV cop show. I got to do some, I'm a science fiction guy, so I would love to work on like a Star Trek or a Twilight Zone. So it took me a while to understand, okay, this is a cop show. What am I going to be able to do?
Different dynamics,
Different
literally
dynamics.
speaking.
Oh, I went nuts on the dynamics. And in fact, Ari and I kind of divvied up the work. He did more of the songwriting ballady-like kind of things. I got to do all the chase cues.
All right.
And I got to do all of my my multimeter Jerry Goldsmith kind of stuff. And even though there's hip hop loops and all kinds of good grungy stuff, the harmonies underneath there, it's Shostakovich, it's Stravinsky, it's all that stuff.
love it.
I found a way to have fun with that. That was 5 years. The show went around the world, and that opened doors to other things. Our most
Plus
recent things we can tout is Anne with an E, which is on
that's
Netflix,
another one.
which is the opposite direction. It's the most smallest stuff we've ever written, and it was 4 live players and a lot of ambient synths.
It's
And you just learn to go with the thing I like about film scoring is the film tells you what to do.
Yes,
And you can come
yes.
up with all the most cleverest things in the world. You're serving the film.
And that actually brings me to another point that I did want to get into with you, which is, you've done work like that, working sound for picture.
Right.
You've also done stuff like incidentals, libraries and things like that.
Yep.
There's a difference there in terms of how you compose as well, in the sense of when you're scoring for film, not only are you scoring for a given scene, but you have to maintain a consistent, I don't want to say voice, but a consistent sort of feel and emotion throughout the entire movie. You can't just go from one extreme to another unless the movie calls for that. But
Right.
there has to be consistency there, doesn't there?
Yep, there is. It's the allusions to creating magic. How does a magician do what they do?
Yeah.
Well, they start at the end. They imagine what the payoff is going to be, and then they
Uh-huh.
work backwards with all the sleight of hand. And in any project, I think film scoring especially too. I mean, you look for where the payoffs are, and then you work backwards. For many film composers, we all know this. You work on the biggest cues first. You nail those big ones. You make sure that you've got a good, solid thematic foundation of what it is you're doing. And then the earlier cues, you're just foreshadowing. You're building. You're hinting at themes that will pay off later. But those themes already exist. John Williams works like this. Jerry Goldsmith works
Great
like this.
examples, yeah.
I mean, really celebrating recently is the 40th anniversary of Star Trek: The Motion Picture, and so I've been reading up on all of that kind of stuff and the beautiful theme that that happens.
Yeah.
It's one of the last things he wrote. It was one of the last cues that he wrote. He worked on all the heavy, incidental, very delicate V'ger stuff later on in the movie. Made that all pay off. And
Makes
then,
sense, though.
Yeah, and then by then themes have started to formulate. Robert Wise and he went back and forth. The first version of the theme he didn't like, so he redid it. And now, it's the Star Trek: The Motion Picture theme used in Star Trek: The Next Generation. But a lot of that comes from all those embers of motifs solidifying into something.
And tying them together.
Yeah,
That's the big thing right there, and John Williams is a great example of that, because he'll come up with a motif and then you'll have really multiple revisits to that. And
theme and variations.
Yeah, and
love that.
It's like a symphony.
Yeah.
And yet it's so joined at the hip with the visual.
Yeah.
So how does that compare with, let's say, doing a library of stuff or something like
well,
that?
It's interesting because library stuff and whether it's library stuff for music that can be used in various processes, and also game music, where
There's
you
another one.
don't have a linear deadline or a linear form that you have to adhere to.
It's inspired
it's incidental.
as opposed to visually inspired.
Right.
And
But it still has to be
continuous.
inspired. There still has to be a core there. But what you have to remember is that core is going to be changed and it's going to be altered, and not necessarily by you. Right? You're creating library music. Someone else may be editing that.
Yeah.
You're creating game music. You're creating all these layers for the game player, and those layers are going to change, but they're not based on you. They're based on levels as the gamer moves up to different goals and tasks.
Yeah.
So you learn to create stuff that can stand on its own, but can also be the foundation of other stuff.
Yeah.
And I love that. I mean, I was very inspired by the original music from Star Trek, the original series, with Alexander Courage and Fred Steiner and Gerald Fried. There's several others, but their task at the time was to be able to create music that was repeatable motifs. How are we doing for time? Are we good?
We're good. Yeah.
Do it in repeatable motifs. So a lot of those original Star Trek themes that we all love and we make fun of now, Gerald Fried's thing for a mock time, dun, 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 right? We all celebrate it. We all make jokes about it. Then the phrase repeats again. Dun, 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 right? That's deliberately written in that style so that it could be edited. All the Star Trek writers were told, come up with malleable themes that we can splice the hell out of.
That's a really interesting point
and
there.
The ancillary effect of that is the themes become very memorable.
Sure.
Because you're hearing them a lot.
It's a soundbite.
Yeah, the
It's an
Charlie
earworm.
X zap chords,
Yeah.
the Spock bass guitar thing.
Yeah.
Because they were literally created as library pieces.
Not to mention the theremin part.
Pardon me?
Not to mention the theremin part.
Oh yeah, no, of course.
I mean, you can hum that to anyone and they know right away what
absolutely,
it is.
they do. They absolutely do. Which was really cool. I got to talk to Gerald Fried. I was on a podcast and I got to be with him and talk to him, and I got to tell him how much I admired his music. He was very sweet. Because, I mean, again, as a teenager, I don't know why, I was into the Star Trek stuff. I was into Tamita and Wendy Carlos and John Williams and Jerry Goldsmith and Stu Phillips and stuff. And everybody else was listening to Billy Joel and Elton John. I couldn't get a girl by playing her a Tamita track. I tried. I just couldn't. And Star Trek music, I absolutely love. Those are the first melodies I started to figure out on the piano. So I told Gerald Fried, I said, your music is beautiful, and I thank you so much for that. It never helped me get a girl. It absolutely didn't. And he laughed, and bless his heart, he said, you should have told me. I have 4 daughters. I could have married you to one of them. So sweet. So sweet. Thank you, Gerald
brilliant.
Fried. Wonderful, wonderful composer.
But it really is true. I mean, it doesn't hold the same appeal. You're not a rock star. You're not a pop star.
No,
but,
exactly.
obviously you fell into this whole thing of addressing those creative juices.
Yeah.
And I think
it's got to be fun.
Yeah.
Please, anyone who's like, "Ooh, this is going to be a moneymaker," now we've got people selling royalty catalogs and treating it like hedge funds and real estate. And it's like, that's not what this is about. It's about,
and that's
it's
a whole other.
innately in us,
Yeah.
right? We're creators. We really don't have a choice but doing this.
That is it exactly.
You know?
If you go into this business thinking you're going to make money, you do have to realize that you're playing lottery-based odds
Yes,
here.
you are. Yeah.
And you don't go into this business to make money. You
Yeah.
go into this business, as you say,
Yeah.
because you have to.
Yeah.
It's the spirit just touches you,
Yeah.
usually at a very early age.
Yep.
And this is just something we do because we love the
Yep.
music.
Yep.
And I tell you, you can compare yourself to other people if you want to. As I say, I think it's pointless, but there are the odd few people in our industry who have made great money, who have been, ubiquitous in their art reaching other people. And the rest of us are grateful for them. Absolutely. To be perfectly honest, I would be doing this if I didn't make a dime.
Yeah, I know.
And
I
that
hear you.
to me is the most important thing about it.
Yeah. Okay, so let's move into a little bit of business, because yes, there are people that know we would be happy to do this without making a dime. The reality is you got to be able to make a living at this. And in television and film, the reason I can even sit here and have this chat with you, and fly myself down here for NAMM, when a show becomes successful, especially on television or network television or on cable, there are residuals that are shared with the director, the actors, the screenwriter, the composers, because we're all part of that intellectual property. The melodies Ari and I created for Flashpoint, those can't be used anywhere else. So it only makes sense that if Flashpoint sells again and again, the same product gets more money again, then there are rules in place that portions of that revenue are shared fairly among everybody else that put into making that intellectual property happen.
Mm-hmm.
Streaming is unregulated, and there are a lot of rules that were circumvented.
Yes. Because it's a whole new landscape.
Whole new landscape.
And it has, and that is part of the problem, is that landscape has not been defined.
No.
In the way it should be.
No, and it needs to get regulated.
I agree
the
with you.
process of that going on right now.
And I'm glad you brought that up, because there are. Let's put it this way: you're not going to get the toothpaste back in the tube. Streaming is here. Streaming is what it is. What needs to be done at this point is to figure out how to legislate those money streams so that people get their fair share. And there are two sides to that whole coin, because obviously, you buy a CD from an artist, for example, they're going to get that mechanical royalty. They're going to get all of those royalties when it's played. It's a different measure of those numbers. Whereas now we no longer really have AM or FM radio being a force in that sense.
Yeah, it's less than it was. It's still there.
It's
I love
still there,
it,
but
doesn't have the
it's
reach
so
it
much
does.
lessened.
Yeah, I'm hoping it can merge with something else so that it can still.
So, all of a sudden now Spotify and its ilk are the main sources. And on the one hand, there's this, people claim there's a certain reality there of, well, if I bought the CD, how many times would I really listen to it? So this is now measuring how many times you really get listened to. That's the record label logic.
Yeah, and I'm fine with all of that, except it's just the percentage that has been set up.
Yes.
When a record label executive
arbitrary.
tells me how hard they sweated on making that deal happen, I'm sorry. Yes, of course there's money that is earned for that kind of deal making. But those numbers have been set by the grown-ups who did not let the kids in the room to decide what's going on.
I wouldn't call them grown-ups. That's too
That's
kind.
a tricky one too.
Yeah.
But let me throw this at you. I mean, it was an interesting analogy you just said about the toothpaste being put back in the bottle, okay? What if we run out of toothpaste?
Well, that's what's happening.
Doing this all over again, and I'm sorry, I'm going to give you the bad news. To somebody just starting in this business the way I did, there's many systems and incentives that just aren't there.
Well, and that's been really a source of frustration for a lot of people. And it's interesting because I ask a lot of people, and I will ask you as well, what you would advise somebody who's 15 years old, wants to come into this industry now.
Okay.
The landscape is so totally different.
Yep, it is.
The incentives on how you can make a living are so totally different. The marketing of your work is so totally different. How does somebody come in at this point?
Like so many other industries and so many other things in our society, there used to be a middle class.
Yep.
That middle class is eroded, and now you either have super upper class beyond rich rudeness, and then you have devastating poverty. Every industry is going through that, including
Yes.
ours.
Yes.
And getting from here to there is now much more of a roulette wheel than it ever was before.
But
Okay.
now,
So for every Justin Bieber that's up here, for every YouTube success that goes viral
yeah,
up here, there are billions more here.
absolutely.
that
And the
have been
odds are
trying.
stacked
The
against you.
odds are the good, and this is the thing. Technology has allowed so many more of us to do what we're doing. You're not going to have the limitations of a Mini Moog and a 4-track the way I did. At the same time, you're now competing against every single person down the street.
Now,
When I first started, I was one of the few kids in Calgary that even had a synthesizer in their
Sure.
house, right?
but now let's play devil's advocate here.
Okay, yep.
The same way that if you go back to the days of sheet music being overtaken by recorded music,
Sure.
people had to come up with a different paradigm.
Yes.
The
absolutely.
paradigm is shifting here,
Yes.
and I believe that there are going to be people who figure out a way
Yep.
to get through it all,
Yep.
to create a middle class, as you say, career of sorts. It won't look anything like the middle class musician career that we came up
Yep.
with.
Yep.
But I think, human beings are incredibly resourceful. You're
Look
going to
at how
find
we've
someone.
survived the last 2 years of COVID.
Yeah.
Many of us pivoted, and
Yeah. I
with
think COVID has really redefined a lot of things that I don't think we're going to really see the results of for several years, because
Agreed.
things have shifted beneath the surface.
Yep.
But I think that I'm optimistic that there's going to be something that breaks through here. You're absolutely right. The present paradigm doesn't work.
It doesn't work, and it is already in the process of being changed. I mean, in Canada, I'm
it's
on the
changing
board
whether
of.
we want to or not,
Yeah.
because people need to be paid.
Yep.
People need to also get their work out there. If you're an artist, that's the one thing you do need.
Yep.
Even if you're sleeping on a floor and starving, what your life's blood is somebody coming up to you and saying, "Wow, I really like that."
Yeah, that's what
you
it
know?
is. Yeah.
And therefore, we're going to find a way as artists. We're
Yep.
going to that 15-year-old kid in his or her bedroom
Yep.
doing the same thing is going to find a way to get that
Yes.
music or that creation of theirs out there.
I'm with you.
And
But in that way, I mean, the rules really haven't changed. Have a plan B, have a game
Yeah.
plan, have
Yeah.
a day job that you can deviate to back and forth. For me, it was broadcasting. Several times in my career, I just took on more radio gigs, more editing gigs, that sort of stuff.
Uh-huh.
When the music gigs ran dry, and then things
Yeah.
reached a critical mass where I now have a steady stream of projects, and I'm very grateful for it. But every day you just have to, keep an eye on so many different things and
Yeah.
look ahead and
Yeah.
look forward.
that
certainly-
ADD thing actually helps.
You know what it does? It does.
But no, you're absolutely right, and there does always need to be a plan B. There was a plan B back when we were coming up too. Maybe it wasn't working at Starbucks, but it was working somewhere.
Yep.
And everybody, if you really want to do something, you're gonna find a way.
Yeah, agreed.
And the same way you had that determination to get to know that synth
Yeah.
and make it.
And
do
then
what
you know
wanted
what?
to
Also,
do.
I have to thank my champions, because there were days I didn't have that determination, but I had people like Steve Porcaro. I had producer David Green in Toronto. I had my wonderful wife, my family. I had friends. On those days where it was really tough, I had those friends that believed in me.
Yeah.
And that did help. And,
need
and
your
that's one of the things we
mentors,
can
yeah.
all do. If you have friends that are very toxic and negative, slowly get them out of your life. Surround yourself with like-minded people, even in other careers.
Not
I have
just
friends who are
like-minded.
graphic artists. I have friends that work in house repair. We all have these ambitious things that fuel us. And surround yourself with those people, because you all keep each other going.
You're right. Your support base, your mentors especially.
Oh, huge.
One thing that I am so grateful for myself, and I know that you are the same way, that we've come to a point where we can mentor others.
Yes, I'm
And
so glad to be able to do that, to give
to
back
be
all
able
the lessons
to
that.
pay that forward. That
Yes,
is,
huge.
to me, the biggest reward of anything.
It is.
And you've been doing just amazing stuff in that respect too. You have been a mentor to so many. You've been an inspiration. and I think that's a fantastic thing.
Just share that passion. Find a way to do it.
Absolutely. Amin Bhatia, thank you so much for being my guest.
Thank you. I hope we covered some of what you had on your agenda. It's we
Not even
jumped
li-
all
not
over
even
the
part of it.
place.
No, but that's what I love about being able to do this show is I can take it anywhere and
Thank
know.
you. And on that note, I got to tell you, your other show, 30 Second Chances, brilliant. I mean, we've known each other through the Bob Milk Foundation, but I think that's the first time I really got to know you and that terrifying buzzer of yours. You're doing some great stuff, sir. Thank you very much. On
thank
behalf
you.
of all the artists that sit on this chair and get to be interviewed by someone like yourself with the different knowledge that you have. He's not paying me to say this, and all the different knowledges that you have. It's really wonderful to be in this circle with you. Thank you.
Gosh, well, thank you so much. I love doing it. I love being able to bring artists like yourself to the fore, and maybe there's somebody who wasn't aware of your work who will now go look it up and say, wow, that dude's kind of cool,
Thank you. Yeah, the Interstellar Suite continues to this day to be that calling card.
It is
synthesizer album that I did.
Yes.
And
please look up the Interstellar Suite if you have never heard it. There's just nothing like it.
And we now have legions of fans that are performing it in drum corps and marching bands. Every year there are renditions of Interstellar Suite that are done by marching bands all over the States. It's amazing. Not something I thought I would be writing for.
That's so
these
cool.
Outstanding arrangements from these brilliant, brilliant arrangers and performers.
Man,
That's
I
a
love it.
huge compliment when something comes back to you like that. It's wonderful.
Goes back to what we were saying, man. The ultimate compliment is when somebody says they love what you've done.
Oh, huge.
That's what matters. Amin, thanks for being
Buddy,
my guest.
thank you so much.
It's been a pleasure.
Good seeing you. Thank you.
Hey, I'm Daniel Keller. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button and join us each week for Insights in Sound. Hey, I'm Daniel Keller. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button and join us each week for Insights in Sound.